It's time for the Josh Kirby on Sports Podcast.
The 100th edition of the Kirby on Sports Podcast continues. Alongside Dan Dembski, my co-contributor, we have a very special guest, longtime kicker in the National Football League, who actually won the league MVP. We have Mark Moseley with us virtually, obviously. But Mark, thank you so much for being with us. It's good to see you, sir. How you been?
Doing well, thank you. And thanks for the invitation here.
Absolutely. We're glad to have
when you said a long time NFL kicker, a long time ago NFL kicker.
Yes, a long time ago. Obviously, there's so many changes in the kicking game between the past and now in the league. And you were actually one of the last kickers to do the straight leg kick. So I want to start off with that, if you don't mind. Like, basically, what is the difference in your mind between the straight leg kick and the more traditional soccer style kick going off from the side from NFL kickers? And what have you seen change in terms of kicking in the National Football League so far between then and now?
Well, the soccer kickers and the straight on kickers are two complete opposite ways to kick. When I came in the league in 1970, there were only three soccer kickers in the league: Gogolak, Stenerud, and I think Horst Muhlmann was kicking at that time too. And everybody else kicked straight on. That's kicking with your toe, approaching it from straight behind. Soccer is from the side. The soccer kicking method is a very strong, very accurate way to kick now. These guys make it look really easy. Straight on was a little bit more difficult because you got that little 3 or 4 inches on the end of your square-toed shoe that you kick the ball with. So you have to make sure that your motion is straight. So it was a lot more difficult to be accurate. That's why it wasn't until I guess the last 10, 15 years when soccer really has developed a very sound way of kicking, that they've become very proficient with the kicking, with the field goals, and percentages have just skyrocketed. I know the kid up here for Baltimore is, I think, probably one of the best, and he's in the way up in the 90s in percentage for his career, which is unheard of. I think back in my day, you have to remember back in my day, we kicked outside in the rain and the snow and the mud and the crud and everything else. So it made a big difference in what they kick on AstroTurf or on the synthetic turf now, indoors usually. On most of the stadiums now are going indoor. So it's a lot different. And those are some of the major differences that have changed it. But back in my day, back when I set the percentage record in 1982, I think it was 96%. I was 20 of 21 kicks when I set the record of 24 in a row. At that time, if you made 60% of your kicks, that was really good. I mean, that was great, actually. Your job was secure. Now, if you don't hit in the 80s or maybe even the low 90s, your job's in jeopardy. And they've been all over Hopkins this year because he's missed some field goals. But I think he's a good kicker and does a good job. He's missed some kicks, but he's proven in the past that he has the ability, and he has the mental ability to be able to overcome those misses and come back strong when they really need him. And that's what really counts. And one of the, I guess for me, the most the biggest thing that I'm most proud of in my career was that, because I came from the old way of actually playing football along with just kicking. Kicking was just something that I added that I could do because I was all the way through college. I played defensive corner, and I was our starting quarterback at Stephen F. Austin. And when I came in the pros, I was drafted as a kicker. And I just kicked because I could. Usually when I went out, I just out-kicked everybody. So, but now the way Hopkins has done it, it's been tough on him mentally. And I know that physically he's got it, but mentally he's got to get it back. He's got to get strong. And I think the last few games he's kind of redeemed himself, and he's come on strong. So I think he's over that hump.
So, as a special teams player, Washington football alumni, yeah, I want to talk about the punting position for a minute. Tress Way, he's been absolutely dominant. Probably one of the best players on the Washington football team, if you ask some people. And
oh, yes, Trace is the best punter, and I hate to say this because Mike Bragg is one of my best friends, but Trace has he's been so consistent every year. You know, the Redskins every year at their welcome home luncheon, they give out the awards for in defensive, offensive, and special team player of the year, and it's named after the special teams award is named after me. And for the last 5 years, I guess, I think he's won it 3 of those 5 years because he is always the most consistent player that they have on the team. They can always count on him to get the booming kicks. And that's what I was getting ready to say earlier is the thing that I'm most proud of is the fact that I went out 44 times in my career in the last 2 minutes to kick a game-winning field goal, and I made 43 of them. And I heard the other night that the kid up here in Baltimore, I'm trying to remember, I can't even think of his name.
Justin Tucker.
Justin Tucker, that he's made 16 game-winning field goals. Well, you know, the thing is, that's why I was a team player. I always wanted to play and didn't want to let my teammates and coaches down. And that's why I'm most proud of that record of making 43 out of 44 game-winning field goals in my career. And I don't think anyone's ever even come close to that.
So when you watch, it's sort of a random question here. When you watch a game on TV and right before the kicker goes up to make a kick and the broadcaster shows the stat of like, he's like kicked such and such amount of consecutive kicks, then he misses.
Right.
Have you seen anything like that before? And like, isn't that irritating when the broadcasters jinx the kicker? I know the kicker can't hear anything, but still.
That's all superstition, and it's not jinx, and they didn't jinx it. It just happened. I know it happened this past weekend. I was watching a couple of games, and it happened. One of those kids had kicked 29 in a row, I think, and he missed the other kick, the kick he was trying at that time, and they just got through talking about it. But you're right, it happens. It's just ironic that it always seems to happen when they're bragging about what they've done. And but you know, that's just football. You're going to make some and you're going to miss some. And that's what makes a good kicker is the guy that makes field goals, but knows he's not going to be perfect. That was the thing that I knew that I wasn't going to make every field goal, but I wanted to be ready when I did miss one that I could come back and make the next one. And that's what makes a good kicker is when you've got that ability mentally to correct yourself, forget about it, put that miss behind you, and go on out there and make the next one. You remember, I don't know if you're too young to remember, but back in 1983 in the NFC Championship game against the San Francisco 49ers, I missed 4 field goals during that game. It was snowing. It was messy. Nobody could stand up on the field. It was just really a mess. But I went out the last play of the game to kick it was 29-yard field goal. And I knew that I could probably do it if I just stood there. So I just stood there and kicked the field goal and made it, and we won it and put us in the Super Bowl. But I had missed 4 field goals that day. But I made the one that counted, though. And that's the kicker that you want to keep around. They may miss some. Kickers are going to miss. They're only human. They're going to miss some field goals. And sometimes they're going to miss 2 or 3. And I remember, I think it was 1980 that I came off my first Pro Bowl year, and I went out that year and I wanted to prove that I was the best kicker in the league. And I think I missed the first 10 kicks of my season. I think I missed 10 of my first 14 attempts that year, but then I corrected it and didn't miss any more the rest of the season. So, I mean, it's all in kicking. It's really more mental than anything.
Yeah. So, I want to get your thoughts here. You said you played defense and quarterback in college, and you said you added kicking as just a position. What made either the teams who you got drafted by the Eagles, by the way, but what made the Eagles decide to draft you as a kicker instead of like the other two positions you
Well, I
played?
was probably because I was a much better kicker than I was a quarterback or a defensive player. I was all state middle linebacker and running back in high school.
Wow.
I still have some state records down in Texas. My senior year, I scored 33 touchdowns in 10 games and had averaged over 300 yards a game rushing. So I had over 3,000. I think it was 3,700 yards in 10 games. But I was recruited by almost all the major schools. I ended up going to Texas A&M, and then I transferred after my first year in A&M because I wasn't into the military at that time. So at that time you had to be in the ROTC to go there, and so I transferred to Stephen F. Austin, and then I played both ways there, and they moved me to quarterback, and I played quarterback and I played left corner. And but to kick, I just always was able to go out and out kick everybody. And that's how I started kicking. My first experience of kicking was my freshman year in high school. I didn't even know I could kick. And I went out on a Thursday before we were playing towards the end of the season. We were getting ready to play a big game against our big rival down the road a ways. And on Thursday, when we went through special teams, I went out with everybody else, and they go out before practice and everybody's punting the ball and kicking and throwing passes and just messing around. And we were out there and some of the guys were kicking field goals. And so I went over, kicked a couple of balls, and my coach saw me kicking and he says, "Mark," he said, "why didn't you tell me you could kick?" I said, "Well, I didn't know I could." Well, he said, "I think we're going to let you try it in practice." I went and kicked in practice, and I was starting at middle linebacker as a freshman for our high school team. And I went out against Woodville and kicked 2 field goals, and we ended up winning 6-0.
There you go.
To win the district. And the next week in by district, I ended up kicking a 39-yard field goal that tied the game, and we won on penetrations. In Texas back then, you decided ties in the playoffs by penetrate how many times you penetrated the other team's 20-yard line. And so we won it, and we went on to the regionals that year. So that's how my career started as a kicker. But I always, everywhere I went, even when I went to A&M, I was recruited to A&M as a quarterback and a defensive player. But I ended up going out and out kicking the other 5 kickers that they had brought in on scholarship that were kickers. And I out kicked them and ended up doing all the kicking as well as playing the other positions. And then when I went to SFA, it was the same thing. I went there and out kicked the varsity kicker they had there, the first in spring training actually, and ended up doing the kicking for the next 3 years for them on top of playing the other position. So, but to get drafted, I think to answer your question there, it's kind of a long-winded answer. I think it was just that I had a very strong leg. I was fast. I could run a 4.3, 5.40. And when I was in college,
Man,
I had the national 220-yard record all the way through high school and for years after I left, because they used to run it on the curve, and I had that national high school record for years, a 20.8, 220. So I had a lot of speed to go along with my strength, the leg strength that I had, and I had a lot of speed with my leg follow through, so it made me a good kicker. To have the size and the speed that I had, it really made me that kicker that could just go out and kind of out kick everybody.
That's absolutely incredible how just coming from a running back defensive player to a quarterback to just trying out kicking one day, and you're actually pretty good at it. That is,
yeah, and it turns out to be the one thing that I could do for years and years to make a living with.
Yeah.
For 16 years in the NFL. So it was good. Lord was trying to tell me something back then, and I just wasn't listening, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. So you got drafted by the Eagles, spent some time with the Houston Oilers, but where the career really was made for you was with the former Washington Redskins.
Yes.
And I have to say, I was just reviewing, looking at your stats, and what a career you had for Washington. You won
Well,
the
but you need to go back. You need to go back to the start there, because playing for the Eagles, I was with them one
Oh.
year, and then I went and played for Houston. In 1970, I was with the Eagles. 71, I was with Houston, and then the next year I came back and I got released. We had a whole new coaching staff and everything, and they cut me for another kicker that the new head coach wanted, who came from his college.
Oh.
It was Peterson was the head coach then, and he was coming from Florida State, and they were bringing him a kicker. I forget what his name was, but they wanted him, and so they cut me after the last cut, and that's when I set out all of that year of 72 and all of 73. I didn't play, and I came back to Washington in 74, and
So
that
so
was kind
was
of
it, oh, I'm sorry.
I said that was kind of a story in itself, how I got here to Washington.
So is it true you spent 2 years writing NFL teams trying to get back with a club?
Yes, I wrote every team. I called and wrote every team in the league, trying to get somebody just to give me a look see. And the way I got here to Washington was a good story. When I was with Houston, I played with Kenny Houston.
Oh,
Kenny
wow.
was, an all everything safety for the Washington Redskins for years. Well, Kenny and I knew one another all the way from high school. Kenny played in Lufkin, Texas, which was 40 miles up the road from where I played high school. And back in those days, all of the black teams played on Saturday nights, and our Caucasian, the regular high schools played on Friday nights. Well, I used to sneak into our stadium because they always played in our stadium on Saturday nights. So I would sneak in so I could watch those players because they were always so good and so entertaining. And I met Kenny Houston when he was a junior at Lufkin High School. They were playing Livingston, and I met him and went in the locker room and introduced myself to him because he was really a well-known high school ball player at that time. And it was really an experience because we've been buddies ever since. We've been good, close friends ever since high school. Well, when I came to Washington, Kenny was the one that told Coach Allen that I was available, that I was out of football, and that he knew how to get in touch with me. And I got a call from the Washington Redskins, sight unseen, and I'm on the phone with George Allen, and he asked me if I could still kick, and I said, yes, sir. I said, I've been working out for 2 years. I'm 20 pounds heavier, and it's all muscle. I said, I'm strong, and I can kick. And he said, okay, I'm going to send you a contract. You sign it, and I'll see you in July. This was in February.
Wow.
He said, I'll see you in July. And I said, well, Coach, you don't want to see me kick? He said, no, I trust. Just be here in July at Carlisle.
No
and
kidding.
We'll get it worked out. Well, when I showed up, they had 9 other kickers on the roster, 9 guys that I had to beat out.
And you beat them out.
I beat all those guys out to win the job. And the rest and then I almost lost it the first game. I almost lost my job. We played the New York Giants up in the New York, the old New York Stadium. That was back when they were rebuilding. No, it was at Yale because they were rebuilding the Yankee Stadium where the Giants played at that time.
Yeah.
And so we were playing it in the old, I think it was the Yale Bowl, and the grass was like a foot thick. I mean, it was so deep you couldn't even hardly see the football when they put it down. But I missed a kick, a 40-yard field goal just before halftime. It was like the last, just before we'd go in at halftime. And I hit a ball and I got really under it, and it came up and it hit the crossbar and came back. But there was a penalty, so they moved it up 5 yards. I kicked that one and hit the right upright and missed 2 field goals in a matter of like 3 seconds. And the next week, I didn't know this until Paul Lanham, who was my special teams coach back in those days, told me this story years later after we both had retired. And he said, do you realize just how close we came to cutting you on that Monday after the first game in New York. And I said, no, sir, I never really had any inclination that y'all were thinking about cutting me. He said, yeah. He said, Coach Allen brought me into his office that Monday morning and asked me, do you think we need to start looking for another kicker? And Paul said, no. He said, let's give him another game and let's see how he does next week. Next week, I made 3 kicks. And from then on, I went on and had a really good first year here in Washington in 1984. And that was my first, or 74. And that was my first year here. And that's the story of how I got here.
Yeah, but your storied career in Washington continues, and you ended up winning the league MVP, as you said, making 20 of 21 kicks and winning Super Bowl 17 as a whole, obviously. But for you to go out and kick so well and win the league MVP, what did that mean to you? That they picked you out of anybody else to win the league MVP, and what along with the NFC Player of the Year as well. So a lot of accolades in 1982. So yeah, what were your emotions like when you found out you were the NFC Player of the Year and league MVP along with first team All Pro?
Well, the big thing was just being nominated. I was shocked when I got word that I had even been nominated as one of the finalists for the NFL MVP that year. But then when they came on that next Friday and said, hey, Coach Gibbs came up to our special teams meeting, and he called me out of the meeting and he said, Mark, he said, I want you to know they just called and said, you've been named this year's NFL MVP. And I couldn't believe it. I almost started crying. It was so unusual. And nobody could really believe it that a kicker would end up being the MVP. And even today, a lot of the people today, I've heard several of these play-by-play guys and some of the former NFL players that don't know a lot about the history back then. And unless you were there, you really couldn't. It's hard to explain why a kicker would end up being the MVP. But I've heard several of them say there's no way that a kicker should ever be the NFL MVP. But, back then, the big thing was you remember if that was a strike year, we played 8 regular season games, or 9 regular season games, and we won 8, and 7 of those 8 I won with field goals.
Yep.
The team.
Well, that'll do it.
Yeah, I think the team scored 100 and I think together that year we scored like 178 points. Or 100, no, it was 100 something points, and I had 78 of them. And in one game, the St. Louis Cardinals games, we won 12-0 on my 4 field goals, or 12-7. I'm sorry, 12-7 on my 4 field goals. So, it was a big year, and it just so happened that I peaked at the right time when the team really, really needed me, and because our offense was just getting started. Joe Gibbs had just been there 1 year. Our offense hadn't really kicked into high gear yet. And then once they needed those field goals, and we had a great defense, and we were winning games, 9-7 and 12-7 and things like that. And it just happened that I was here, we were together at the right time. But once our offense kicked into gear, if you remember the next year in 1983, we set an all-time NFL scoring record for the season of 560. I think it was 561 points for the year as a team, but I scored 162 of them that year. That was an NFL record. So, there were just a lot of things that happened at the right time. Just so, I was here at the right time when the team really needed somebody that was mentally strong enough to handle those kind of pressure situations and go out and win games. And I just enjoyed it. I had enough confidence in my ability that I wanted it to come down to me.
Wow. Dan, did you want to add anything to that?
Well, I was just going to ask you, when did you think you saw a shift of maybe at the college level, but the NFL level too, of, pure kickers, as in, not guys in college who, like yourself, found out you kind of kicked by accident,
That played other positions.
Correct. Yeah. When do you think it became something that was like highly sought after? would you say? And
it was when I came in the league. It had already shifted because, as you remember, Luke Groza was an All-Pro. He's in the Hall of Fame as the offensive lineman, but he was a kicker. George Blanda, who was my mentor, he was the guy that I looked up to when I was in high school and college, because he was a quarterback and a kicker. He did both and played. He was in his 50s when he retired.
Right.
And so, I think by the time I came around in 70, it had already shifted to that, because all the kickers in the league at the time when I came in were pure kickers. And that's why, there's only been two pure kickers, Stenerud and what went in
Rick
last year.
Danmeer.
No, Rick Danmeer was with Minnesota. The kid that went in the Hall of Fame last year. He was from Atlanta, kicked for Atlanta for years.
Ooh.
Oh man, my brain won't. I can't.
Yep. On the tip of my tongue. I thought.
Yeah, I can see his face, but I can't say his name. But anyway, that he was. Those back then, all those kickers were just. We were just kickers.
Yeah.
Now I was a backup. I was the third team quarterback for the Redskins when George Allen was here. Yeah, because he didn't want to carry a third quarterback, but he made sure that if we got in desperation that that would have somebody that could at least take a snap from center. And,
did you ever do that?
No, I have a story that I tell sometimes, but the show's not long enough for me to tell the story. But it about when I almost got in a game against Dallas one year. But that was as close. Y'all remember back when Kilmer was the quarterback and Theismann was his backup, and Kilmer got knocked out the first quarter, and Joe had to come in and he played the second quarter and third quarter, and then Joe got knocked out or got his teeth knocked out or something in the middle of the fourth quarter.
My God!
And I thought I was going to have to go back. They had me warming up on the sideline, and but that's about as close as I got because Billy went back in.
Were you nervous?
Yeah,
had to be, right? Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. Because I hadn't played quarterback in quite a while.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
That's
but I had what they did is he had me to I had 5 running plays and I had 5 passing plays that I had to that if I got in there that's what we had 2 offensive plays we were going to run them over and over if I was in there, but it would have been I'm afraid it might have been a sight, but I always thought I could do it if I ever got the chance.
Right. Oh, I love that. That's an awesome story.
So Super Bowl 17, you have a ring to prove it. Well, walk us through what it was like that storied season, getting all the way to the Super Bowl, and what was it like actually kicking in a Super Bowl?
Well, it was exciting. There's no doubt about that. I remember going out early before the game ever started and just walking out on the field in awe. Because we were at the Rose Bowl, which is a huge stadium. Oh. It held 110,000 people, and with all the hoopla going on, and the stadium all dressed up like they were going to a prom or something. The stadium was just all lit up, and everything was. It was just an amazing feeling to walk out on the field and think I'm actually in a Super Bowl, because I'd been in the league at that time. In 82 or 83, it was in January of 83. I'd been in the league 12 years, and I knew my career was probably drawing down, and the chances of going to a Super Bowl. A lot of guys have played for a lot of years and never been to a Super Bowl, but that's the culmination of your career. When you get to play in a Super Bowl and win a Super Bowl, you've accomplished something. I think when the league gave out, it's been about 4 or 5 years ago, they gave out these golden footballs to every player in the NFL that had played in a Super Bowl. And they gave us a golden football, and they gave us one to give to our high schools. There were only 3,500 players out of all those years of playing in Super Bowls that got those footballs.
Including my alma mater.
Yeah, it's a huge, huge honor just to get to play in a Super Bowl, but to win a Super Bowl is even greater. So, it's awesome. it's quite an amazing thing.
It's incredible. The story of you and your kicking career so far. In Mark's career, he made 300 out of 457 with a career of 65.6. So do we have any stories about you sort of wrapping up your career with the Cleveland Browns?
Well, I guess you could say it was a story. I'd been cut and sitting at home for 6 weeks when I got the call. I actually was doing, excuse me. I was actually doing CBS Sports with, oh gosh, what was the gambler guy that used to be on there with Brent Musburger and
Brent Musburger.
But who was the guy that used to do CBS? They did the pre-show and the half like they do now on that they have. But I was doing that show, and oh gosh, what's it? He was the big gambler that was they had him on there because that's when they started picking games and had percentages and God.
Yeah,
I can't believe
I don't remember.
But anyway, yeah, we were on the air when we saw Barr go down during the game because we were watching all the different games on all the TVs they had in there in the studio, and somebody came out and brought me a little note, and during our show, and handed it to me, and it was a note that said, "You have a call from Art Modell from the Cleveland Browns," and Jimmy the Greek. That's who it was, Jimmy the Greek. That was the guy that was on the air with us. And Jimmy said, "Oh, just ignore it. It's just some crank call or whatever." So I didn't pay any attention to it. But then after we got through with the show that evening, I was looking at that note that this guy had given me, and it had the phone number. So I picked up the phone and I called, and sure enough, it was Art Modell on the other end from the Cleveland Browns. And he had seen me on the air doing this as we were wrapping up the game and all. And they were sitting in their suite up at the stadium, and he was with Ernie Accorsi, was their GM at that time. Mm-hmm. And he asked Ernie, he said, "What are we going to do about a kicker?" And he looked at the screen down there and he said, "That guy right there." And he pointed at me on the screen. And that's when they called me. That's how I ended up in Cleveland. So I called him back, and sure enough, they said, "Well, listen, we want you here quick. Can you get here tomorrow?" I said, "Well, I'm in New York right now, but I'll catch a flight back and catch the first flight I can get out tomorrow." And sure enough, because they played on Thursday, that was a week before Thanksgiving, or the week of Thanksgiving, and we were playing the Houston Oilers on Thanksgiving that week. So I got there. There were two other kickers. We went out and kicked Monday afternoon, and I won the job kicking. I went out that first game against the Houston Oilers and kicked a game-winning field goal. My first.
That's crazy.
First game I played for the Cleveland Browns, I went out the last play of the game and kicked I think it was a 47-yard field goal to win the game.
Wow.
At the end of the field where the dog pound was. And you always you always, if you were a player in Cleveland, you had to have the dog pound on your side. They had to love you. And after that first game I played, they loved me there in Cleveland. It was crazy how they accepted that just because I kicked a game-winning field goal to beat the Houston Oilers.
Well, like you said, right place, right time. It's just kind of how it works out, man. It's funny sometimes.
Yeah,
that's great.
My whole career was like that. I just happened to be at the right place at the right time when they really needed me, and I could do the things that I could do using the abilities that I had and make it work and help the team win.
Yeah,
that was what it's all about.
So. Are you? I saw that little hit you did with Peyton Manning kicking on the national wall. Do you think you could come in as an emergency kicker for any teams if they needed you?
I gave up that thought a long time ago. Yeah, I used to carry a bag in the trunk of my car. I used to go to all the games every Sunday here, and I always kept my kicking shoe in a bag in the back of my car. Just in case.
You never know.
Just in case I got to a game and the kicker went down and they had to have somebody quick. I would have my shoe ready to go.
Oh my gosh.
But I
That's awesome.
I gave that up a long time ago.
So what was that like kicking field goals with Peyton Manning?
That was fun. I really had a lot of fun because I hadn't kicked in 30 years. I had
No kidding.
I had not had my shoe on and swung my leg in 30 years. And I told Peyton that. I said, I haven't kicked in 30 years. And he said, well, let's give it a try. And he said, and by the way, the goalposts are going to be on the mall, and the Washington Monument is going to be right in the middle of the goalpost.
Oh my God.
We're going to film from. And sure enough, when we got there, I was kicking right at the Washington Monument. Every kick you could see, that was my target.
That's incredible.
Oh, it was special to be able to do that.
Even with Peyton Manning, one of the greats in the National Football League. That must have been a great honor to have that happen.
Well, I've known Peyton just about his entire life. I've known him since he was 3 years old.
Really?
His father was on the first Nike All-Pro team with me.
Wow.
They picked 12 of us. That was in 1978, 77 or 78, I think. And Nike started that was the first time they started getting into the making of shoes for football. And they started picking a Nike All-Pro team every year. And that was the year that I made it. I had been on the team. I was picked every year up to that point, but the year I was MVP was that his dad was on the team with me, and we used to take trips. Nike would take us somewhere during the off season every year with our families. We went to Montego Bay. We went to Aruba one year. We went to different places during the off season, but they let us bring our families with us. And it was really nice because all of us, I was on this team with the Pittsburgh Steelers greats, the linebackers, Lambert and Ham. I remember when my MVP year, every year at our trip, we would vote who the MVP of our group was. And I remember Jack Ham coming up to me and says, Mose, he says, it really hurts me to have to vote for a kicker to be the MVP, but I'm going to vote for you. Coming from this vicious linebacker, that I thought that was quite a saying.
What an honor, yeah.
But we had our families with us, and Peyton and his brothers were always there. We were always playing flag football or doing something together on the beach or whatever. So I've known him for most of his years. His mom and dad have always been good friends for years.
Well, that's great. That's great.
That's
But
awesome.
that Peyton's Places segment was impressive. I watched the whole thing, and I got a kick out of it, even when you hit Peyton in the head.
Yeah, you could tell he had never held before. He didn't know he had to keep his head out of the way.
Oh, man.
So,
I was just surprised I could swing my leg. I couldn't walk very well the next day, but I did get through that little 10-minute session that we had.
I bet. So, looking more towards present day, you're in the Ring of Honor for this Washington Football Club. What was that like when they put your name up in the Ring of Honor at FedEx Field?
Well, that's, here in Washington, that was phenomenal. That's the best of the best that have played here in Washington. And it's just an honor. I always thought it was just an honor to have played for the Washington Redskins, but then to be placed in the Ring of Fame up there, the Ring of Honor, even makes it more special. And it's more, I think now it's gotten to the point where when I get honors, it's more for my family than it is for me, because I'm almost 73 years old now, and I'm getting on up there, but I try to stay in decent shape, but it's really for my family. They're the ones that, and my grandkids and great grandkids will be able to look back and say, hey, my great granddad, this is what he did. And there's proof of it.
Absolutely.
That's incredible. So, any former players you still keep in touch with back in the day, or anything like that? Any cool stories you have from like?
Yeah, no, I still stay in touch with Kenny Houston. Matter of fact, Kenny's not doing well health wise. He lives down in Texas in Houston, right out in Humble, right outside of Houston. Lives close to where my daughter lives. So I try to see him when I go down there. And then, but I see Joe T and Mike Bragg. I'm the president of our Redskins Alumni Association. So I kind of keep up with the old guys, and we have, we get together when we can. We do a lot of golf tournaments together. We do a lot of fundraisers and things of that nature. So I see a lot of the guys. But Mike Bragg and Joe and Dave Butts, Dave just went through a really rough bout with COVID-19.
Oh my.
He was in the hospital for about 3 weeks with it.
Oh my.
And he was my roommate for all those years I played with Washington. We were roommates, so we're pretty close. And Joe Theismann and Dave and I used to always travel to the home games together.
Wow.
There's a lot of stories about that, but I don't know. Some of them I can't tell on
yeah,
to the general public, I guess.
Yeah,
But we had some good ones.
So how'd you feel when Washington swept Dallas this year? That must have had a happy place in your heart.
It's been a long time since that happened. That's for sure.
Thanksgiving, eating turkey, and then watching Montez sweat. Just pick Andy Dalton off, and you have a ball game.
Yeah, it was it's a big thing. That was a big win for us. I'm really proud of the team. Whether they win the division or not, I think people should be proud of the way they've come together and played this year. With their coach having cancer like that and fighting it, I think has been a big mindset change to the players. I'm really proud that he's bringing a culture here, and that culture is a culture not to quit and to always believe you can win. That's been something that's been missing here in Washington for a long time, and I think Ron's bringing that mindset back here to Washington.
Yeah, with like all the controversy, there was a ton of controversy before this year started. Like the name change, the post articles and stuff. Most recently, Dwayne Haskins, and Ron Rivera has seemed to just keep doing what he does best, and he has shown, in my opinion, and hopefully in your opinion, that he is a proven leader, and he can bring Washington to some more better times, and hopefully the ultimate goal of winning a Super Bowl one day.
Yeah, I haven't heard a lot about Haskins this week. I just know that he got in trouble doing something stupid.
Yep.
And especially when you don't have a quarterback, and he's the only thing we've got here, and we're in a run for a playoff game. You don't go traipsing off somewhere and doing something, especially with this pandemic that we've got going on. You've got to really be cautious not to put yourself in danger, because you've got to always put the team first. And if you're going out and doing stuff that could make you get sick or whatever, you're hurting your teammates, and you got to think about that before you do all these things. And I think from what I understand, that was something that was really stupid that he did, and I hope he learned from it, because he's young, and I mean, we all make mistakes, and I hope he gets by it, but I just hope it doesn't end up hurting the team here. We got 2 more big games we got to win.
Absolutely. So as an alumni, tell us your thoughts on Alex Smith's remarkable comeback. I know he has a calf injury. Thank God it's not anything more serious than that, but his remarkable comeback this season, what were your thoughts? Were you able to watch it, him come back in that game, and what were your thoughts?
I was probably more nervous than he was. I'm amazed that he could come out on the field like that and perform as strong as he did. That because his injury wasn't just a typical injury that players go through. His injury was one that was really, he almost lost his leg. They wanted to amputate. He and his wife had to beg him not to amputate his leg. And he was in big trouble. And to be able to come back from that and to do what he's done is remarkable. It's got to be one of the most remarkable comebacks that's in the history of the NFL. And I think if he doesn't win the comeback player of the year, nobody deserves it after what he's gone through. But I'm hoping that he's back, because without him right now, I'm afraid they just don't have a shot at it, even with their defense, because their defense really is I think one of the best defenses in the league.
I agree.
And I think they can carry this team, and they proved it over and over. But the offense has to score a few points. I remember when I first came to Washington, the first thing that Coach Allen told me was, when he brought me here, was he said, you know, Mark, he said, I brought you here because I needed somebody that can make kicks in all kinds of weather. And he said, I remember when you kicked 4 field goals against my Redskins back in 1971 when you were with the Oilers. He said, you kicked 4 field goals in a driving rainstorm here at RFK Stadium. And he said, I'm always going to have a great defense. All I need is 3 points on the board in any kind of weather. And he says, now you go out and beat those other 9 kickers and the job's yours, because I think you can do it. He said, I think you're the guy for the job. And as it turned out, I did that. And he was right. We always had a great defense. All the years that I played here in Washington, we had a great defense. We may not be number 1, but we were in the top 5 or top 6 or 7 defenses every year. And that year in '82, if it hadn't been for our defense, we wouldn't have made the playoffs that year. But our defense kept us in the games.
Incredible. Dan, did you have anything?
I was just going to ask, do you remember the longest kick you made, and what was it like when you, like, what was the relief and all that like when you saw it go through?
Well, it happened to be 19, I think it was 77 or 78. We were, no, it was later than that, because I remember Mark May was on the team. I think it was Mark May's rookie year, which would have been what, 80 or 81? It was in Philadelphia anyway. And it was a 54-yard field goal. It was at 1:30 in the morning on Monday night television.
Oh my God.
It was a Monday night game. And it was, I think we were in the second overtime or something.
Oh,
and
man.
I ended up kicking a 54-yard field goal that won the game. And the reason I remember is because I looked over at I think it was Mark May and Mayday. They had been out there forever. You know, they had been playing 6 quarters, I think. And he looked at me and he says, Moseley, if you miss this kick, you're going to walk back to Washington, because it was in Philadelphia. The game was in Philadelphia. So, but I made it, and it felt good because it was a big field goal. But I had a pretty strong leg. My longest field goal that I ever kicked in practice was 74 yards.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
And the very next weekend against the New York Giants up in New York, Pardee was the coach, and he sent me out in the fourth quarter to attempt a 72-yard field goal. And it was wide right. It was long enough. It ended up in the 4th row of seats behind the goalpost. And it only missed at the very end. The wind caught it when it started losing momentum, and it pushed it off to the right, and it grazed the right upright.
Wow.
It's 72-yarder.
So what do you think of,
my average miss that year was 58 yards.
Wow.
Oh, man, unreal.
I tried so many long. I made, I think I was 6 of 8 of 50-yard field goals. That was the first year that anybody had ever made 2 50-yard field goals in one game.
Wow.
No kidding.
I did that against the Giants. Kicked a 51 to tie the game, and a 51 in overtime to win it.
Wow, that's impressive. So
Thrill.
Wrapping up, I have pretty much one final question I wanted to touch on. The kickers in the league over the past maybe 5-10 years, we've seen some 61, 62, even Matt Prater breaking Sebastian Janikowski's record, and 65, I believe. You have Jake Elliott, Joey Sly kicking a 61-yarder, if I'm correct there, Dan. But all these kickers kicking long range, what do you have to say for that? Just the power and everything?
That's the soccer.
Yeah.
That's the soccer style, because of the momentum they have. It's just like a golf swing. They have a really long, if you watch how they kick, they have a really long motion. They've got a lot of leverage when they make contact, and they don't kick the ball up. I used to have to get the ball up really fast. But the soccer guys now drive the ball a lot more than we. And they've changed some of the rules so it's a lot easier now that you can't jump up, and you can't use the center to repel yourself up and block it. All kinds of stuff but we used to have to get the ball up real fast. But they kick the ball line drive, and they're kicking it a long way. And kickoffs, you notice most of the kickoffs now are way behind. They're deep in the end zone or out of the end zone.
Absolutely. Dan, any final thoughts before we wrap things up?
No, this has been great. It's been great getting to learn more about Mark's career, and we know how nice and humble of a person you are, and so.
You think really? So? Well, that's good that you think that.
It's great.
Yeah.
It's great just getting to learn more about your career and kicking on the 100th edition of my podcast too, which is amazing.
Congratulations on that.
Oh yeah.
Congratulations on that. I remember when you were talking to me several years back when you were just getting started, wanting to start doing this.
Yeah.
And now you've already done 100 shows. That's
100 shows.
That's
professional setup and everything. I know. I didn't want to start bringing in people like you until I was good enough at this, but I've gotten a lot of people and a lot of supporters behind me, and I was like, I need to do something special for my 100th, and I just can't thank you enough for being a part of that.
Well, you're welcome. I'm glad I could be here and help you out, and hopefully you'll have another 100.
Yeah,
absolutely.
We're hoping so too. As always, Mark, thank you again. I hope you and your family stay safe during these uncertain times. I know it's rough, but we will get through this together. We couldn't have done this without the support of Regroup Building Services, PM Plus Reserves, and Shenandoah Primitives on the 100th edition of the Kirby on Sports podcast. We will wrap things up right after this.